Good morning and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Leah Love and this is True Crime and Beauty. It is where I put on some makeup, where I'm telling you something about a true crime. Lately I have been really interested in the characters, the real characters, the real people behind the characters that were on American Horror Story, different versions of American Horror Story. You know, they've had a bunch of seasons. It's actually a show that I really, really like. And so I have decided to take a little mini series here and kind of cover all of the criminals and interesting cases are actually factual in the show. So if you haven't yet, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And if you like this, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up. Let's go on and get started. We're going to be covering the Blood Countess that is featured in American Horror Story Hotel. Now, yes, this character is based off of someone. I actually did the research and looked into who it was based off of, because some of the characters are fictional. A lot of the characters are fictional, or they've taken bits and pieces off of someone that's in real life and put them into the actual character to give it more life, more, maybe even more that eerie feeling that they draw you into. But yeah, that's who we'll be covering today. As always, I will be telling you what I'm using as I go along so that you know. If you guys end up preferring that I either list it or put like a little tag at the bottom of the screen and tell you, please go ahead and leave a comment down below and tell me that. Also, I don't mind comments. I actually really love them. And so let's go ahead and get started. Today I'll be using the I Heart Revolution, the Little Mermaid Disney collection. It's really cute. It's got blushes and eyeshadows in here, and I thought it'd be really fun to use today. I have a lot of makeup that I just haven't used because I haven't filmed in so long, and this is now episode 3 of my true crime series. And yeah, I'm glad to see that you guys are watching it and enjoying it. So I'm going to go ahead and prime my lids today with Too Faced Shadow Insurance Anti-Crease Primer. This is a really good primer. Alright, let's get started. Like I said, this is the woman who played the Countess. Well, she didn't play the Countess. She is the Countess that the American Horror Stories Countess that Lady Gaga played. So, her real name is Elizabeth Bathory. She was born in Hungary, which is now Slovakia. Now, there are going to be some names that I'm going to seriously mess up. I'm sorry. Mean no disrespect to anybody. I'm very sorry. But some of them are really hard. Okay? So, we will try to get through it together. So, Elizabeth Bathory was born to George and Anna Bathory in Hungary, and they were like really important people. They were wealthy and had land. They had land and a lot of prestige. Her father was like a big government official, and her mom actually descended from like Hungarian royalty type of thing. So this is like a biggie kind of family. Like, they're like very prestigious. And so she was born to them August 7th of 1560. I know, we're hitting a long time ago, but just go with it. And like I said, she was born in Hungary, which is now known as Slovakia. I'm going to stumble over that every time I say it. I just know it. And when she was born like what they called like a sick child. She had intense and frequent seizures. And so she just would have them all the time. And I don't know if you've ever seen someone with a seizure and things like that. This is a very complicated disorder, and back then they didn't have the same type of science that we have now, and medication and all of that. So you can only imagine what she went through. And as this goes on, I'm actually surprised she lived as long as she did. They also believe that she had some mental disorders, possible psychopathy, and sociopathy. Yes, they are different, but they do have a tendency to go together. One of the treatments that they used for trying to treat her seizure illnesses was an old folk remedy. Like, they had that kind of stuff back then. Remember, witches and all of this stuff. They believed in all of this type of things, that so they would take the advice of these people who maybe knew about this kind of stuff. And one of them was to take the blood of a well child or a well person who was not inflicted with stuff like this, and would rub the blood of them on the lips that they inflicted. So she was getting blood rubbed on her lips at, from birth to who knows how long. And I'm wondering if that led to like her later on interest, like they called it bloodlust, but it's just interesting. I wonder if it later on helped to maybe continue that, or was it like, I can't say it was at the beginning of like this witch hunt or anything like that, but she was a child, she was an infant, and even a small child, they didn't really know what she was going to grow up and be. So her family, talking a little bit about her family was loaded, like owned a lot of Transylvania type rich, like they were rich, right? Again, Transylvania, vampire, blood countess kind of thing. You can see like the unraveling of kind of the concept behind the blood countess in American Horror Story. Like, I could see it as I was researching it. And so they were like super, super rich. And she was raised in this castle, like a big castle in Hungary. And it was this is going to be terrible. It was Castle Exed, E-C-S-E-D. And that's where she grew up, in this castle. And her uncle was the King of Poland at the time. These are like influential people. You're getting what I'm saying. It's like these people had everything going on around them. And so even though that they had like a lot of money, and people often get that concept skewed as, hey, they have a lot of money, so they don't have all the problems that common folk or peasants, that they called them back then. I'd be a peasant. They'd call me a peasant back then, but they still had the same like horrific things that would happen to them. Like, Elizabeth was born very, very ill, having all of those seizures, and then later on developing like sociopathy, psychopathy. Those are later on terms that they have. People like psychologists and things have researched her and thought like, okay, this is more likely what she had as well, on top of the seizures. On top of that, that she also ended up watching her sisters be the R word, and also murdered. So she definitely didn't have like the most perfect life, and the things that she saw probably led to a lot of trauma. You can only imagine, right, if you had to sit there and see that kind of stuff. So knowing that, she watched her sisters have to go through that kind of stuff, and seeing them murdered was probably pretty daggone traumatic for a child. or even a human being having to watch that. The family was also known, and this is not unusual. Now, I know you guys are going to be like, what? But when, back in the day, it wasn't uncommon for families that were well off or rich or any of that to breed within the family, because their thoughts on that were that they didn't want to bring anybody from outside the family into the family and mess up the bloodline. So their thoughts were like they wanted to keep the bloodline pure, which, as we know today, is not a healthy thing. So that went on while she was young. And see, now she got engaged to her future husband at like 10 years old. Oh yeah, 10 years old. I look at my kids and I'm like, I cannot imagine you guys being engaged already. But yeah, you know how the arranged marriages and stuff. It didn't speak of this being an arranged marriage. So she had, since she was already engaged to this man, so she was betrothed, so she wasn't supposed to be out doing anything else that she shouldn't be doing. But she was. Okay. Times were back then were different, and she was out just maybe sowing some of her oats before she got married. And so at 13, she gave birth to a child that was obviously not her fiance's. And her family was very displeased at this. They were not liking that, because it would bring shame to the family. So what they did was they made sure that they took care of the problem. And they actually had some close friends of the family take the child, and they were paid for this. And the child was taken to Wallachia. Now, I know I'm not saying that right. I tried looking it up. I tried to get Google to tell me how it sounds, but even Google was a bit off with how it was. It didn't really know either, so I tried my best. And so the child, that's pretty much all you hear about the child now. You don't hear anything else. The child went and hopefully had a happy, wonderful life, was adopted, from someone who couldn't have children, and lived a happy, long life. That's just how we're going to go with it, okay? And so they didn't want shame to be brought to the family, so that's why they did that, okay? So the child had a good, long, happy life. That's what we're going to go with. We're going to believe that in our brains, because I really, unfortunately, don't know, because I couldn't find any information. Couldn't even find the child's name, to be very honest. But not long after she gave birth, she was, 13, at the lovely age of 15, in 1575, she got married. And her hubby's name was Count Ferenc Nadasdy. Okay? Yeah, no. I'm sorry again with the messing up the names, but these are names that I'm not going to be good with. Now, it didn't say anything negative about their marriage. I mean, he was a very important man. Like, if she was rich, he was very rich. You know what I mean? Like, he was super rich. So the combined two made them extra loaded. For a wedding gift, this gives you an idea of how loaded they were all. One of their wedding gifts was a castle. Like, an entire castle. Like, hey, you need a castle. Okay, let's get a castle. Okay, here you go. Here's your little castle. Move from castle to castle. Enjoy it. All your big old rooms and all this fanciness, okay? Now, this castle was called Castle Siachetis. Bear with me, okay? And while they got married, her husband was given more responsibilities by the king. This is Essence Make Me Brow. He was given extra responsibilities by the king and became chief commander of the Hungarian troops, and he led them to war against the Ottoman. And now I'm adding, to define some of the outer edges, I'm adding the Too Faced Super Fine Brow Detailer. I actually really love this pencil, it goes on really smooth. The Countess's husband was out at war. It gave Elizabeth some more responsibility as well. And she became in charge of taking care of the financial things that had to go on just in general of their area, and also the estate finances and well-being. Like, she was making the decisions for everything, okay? But this didn't just leave off at the castle. She actually was in charge of the Hungarian and Slavic people's health care. So she had to make sure that everybody had like good health care and were taken care of, which that was good, you know, and it didn't talk poorly about her job doing that. It's funny, there are some things I can talk through and some things I can't, and like doing my brows I have to concentrate. But when, like many military wives and families, you guys will get this. When hubby came home, they got to making some babies. And from 1585 to 1595, they made babies. And they had 5 children. Now these 5 children, you know, they're born into wealth and all of this stuff, but you really don't know much about them. It's just I happen to be able to find their names. So their names are Anna, Arsolia, Catalin, Andras, and Pal. I hope I said those good. I'm sorry if I didn't. Again, like I said, these names are really hard for me to pronounce. So while, you know, by now, her and her husband had been together for a really long time. I mean, if they were engaged at 10, even though she had a child in between and we don't know what happened to that child, they've been together a long time. I mean, she was 10 and, you know, married at 15, and now they're having kids. So it seems like everything's going great, right? You know, he's got some extra responsibilities. You know, the king has, you know, noticed him, and everything's going great. They got land, they got money, they got beautiful castle, happy life, right? They got servants that come and go and help them out around the house. So everything's going really, really well, right? Or so you would think. And like I said, it didn't talk about like them having any marital problems or anything like that. It didn't say that they had a bad marriage or that anything went poorly with them. It just didn't. This is the LA Girl face primer, and it's to help correct. It's got some pink in it. So as this went on, you know, he probably went back and forth to war because that's what people who are in the military do. They go back and forth to war, and at some point in time, her husband in 1604 got really, really ill. Like, he became paralyzed and then passed away, which is super sad because this is probably the love of her life, or so she believed this was the love of her life. And then I'm going to take some of the e.l.f. Poreless Putty and just add it in certain little areas around here. And people wonder, like, is this, the death of her husband, the trigger that sent her over the edge into, like, madness? Was it the trigger that sent her over the edge to madness? Or was he, like, the last straw in the cover-up of everything that she had been doing behind the scenes? Some people believe that blood of the youth kept you looking young. So they would paint it on their faces and things like that to make them stay young. Kind of like we do with, retinol and vitamin C and all this stuff that we put on our face. So that's what she's known for. Like, if you see her in things, you'll see, like, people who, like, talk about her in movies or TV shows or series. They kind of insinuate either she was, like, a vampire or she bathed in the blood to stay youthful, things like that. You'll see, like, little references, and even in horror movies, I've seen little references where I'm like, yeah, I know who they're talking about there. And now I'm going with the Smashbox Studio Skin Full Coverage 24-Hour Foundation. Now, as time went on, they had begun suggesting that, some of the younger town folk women were going missing, and, or they'd go up to the castle and they would never show back up home. They would just be stuck. Now, some people, I would have thought, like, if someone goes missing and you know exactly where they went, isn't that where you would start first to look for them? Or no, I guess not. Back then, they're like, oh, she's at the castle, okay, she's missing. But as rumors started to circulate, oh, now we get worried about it. I don't know. Her husband's dead, she's a widow, she has 5 kids. To me, it just seems very convenient for people to start questioning what's going on. Or placing blame on her. With the previous accounts of murders being of peasant people, they really didn't pay no mind to it, Like, the king was like, okay, whatever, peasant people go missing all the time. Glad I didn't live back then. The concealer today that I'll be using is the multi-use sculpting concealer by Too Faced. So, as long as, these peasant people were going missing, it didn't matter so much. But then came the high society women. The girls would be sent to this castle to learn proper etiquette of how to be, like, royalty. Maybe like a training school or a finishing school, perhaps. Maybe that's what, kind of like that, And then they were going missing. And for some liquid blush, we're going to add She Glam's birthday suit. So as long as the peasant people were going missing, it was okay. But when she upped her ante, or what they think she upped her ante, once the royal people started going missing, then it became much more of a big deal. Like, oh no, okay, front line, head of the newspaper. They didn't have newspapers back then, but you get what I'm saying. It's like, oh, okay, it's a big deal now. Which really wasn't fair to those peasant people, but, at least it started garnering some attention. To set everything down, I'm going to go ahead and use Too Faced Ethereal Setting Powder. So now that these murders are actually starting to get some attention, the king was like, uh-oh, we better do something about this, right? And so he sends out her own cousin to do the investigation. Now, her cousin was a count in his own right. He was Count Palatine. His name was Grigory Thurzo. And so here's where things kind of, I don't know. I'll let you guys decide in the comments on how you guys feel about this. But so he starts questioning. He goes out in 1609. He's like, mind you, this is only 5 years after her hubs has passed. And now it's like, oh, okay, all eyes on her. Now, granted, those royal girls had started going missing or not returned back to their homes like they were supposed to. So now Gregory is out like on a mission. He's like, okay, let's see what I can find out on my cousin. What's she been up to, right? Which I was kind of like, they had made him investigate his own cousin. That sounds fishy right there. But things were done differently back in those days. I don't know. Like, I wouldn't want to investigate my own cousin. That would suck. And to add some warmth back into my face, since I have evened out my skin tone, I'm going to go ahead and use the Butter Bronzer by Physicians Formula. This is one of my favorites. I use it all the time. I go through these. This is like my favorite, most favorite. So he's going around and he's questioning the villagers, like, hey, have you heard anything weird about the castle, you know, or the Countess? Have you heard anything? Do you have anybody that's gone missing? You know, it's like, I could just see him just like creeping. Like, you know, what have you heard? And of course, once one person starts talking, everybody's going to start talking. For one reason or the next, either to gain attention or to come forward and tell their story. But because that's usually how it happens. When you find out there's one victim, people usually have a tendency to come out and be like, okay, well, I know a victim, and it gives them a safe place to, you know, venture out and talk about things that have happened or that's going on. And whether they're true or not, it gives them attention that they wanted at that time. And so, yeah, people kept giving their own accounts. Just like, hey, yeah, by the way, I had someone go missing. Oh, yeah, my sister's cousin's brother's uncle's niece went missing, you know, and she just never seemed to return. It's just so weird. So Gregory is just like writing all of this down, like, really? Like, oh, okay, you saw that? Oh, you have someone missing now? Okay. Okay, and he's just got his little notepad and he's just writing away. Like, I can picture this. Don't ask me why, like, I could just picture this. And remember, this is his own cousin, so if something happened, he does have something to gain if, you know, she's put away. He's got, you know, his family can share the land that she has. And remember, if she was rich and then she married her hubby who was rich, they were like rich, so they were richer than the family. So naturally, they wanted to get their hands on stuff. This is just, you know, my thought process as I'm going through this and reading this. I'm going to go ahead and just use the blushes that are in here. He's got people in his ear just like chit-chatting him up, telling him like, oh yeah, well, so-and-so went missing and all of this stuff. As time goes on, these whispers and rumors start to expand as rumors do. And he's becoming overwhelmed. He realizes that, wow, there's like 600 or more people who have gone missing. And it is said that the last place they were seen was the castle. Okay. So they couldn't have gone missing on their way back home. It has to be the castle. So why didn't they just go back and start talking to people at the castle? You say, well, they did. And people just weren't as chatty at the castle, right? They were kind of like more nonchalant about things. Like, I don't know what you're talking about, you know. I don't really know what's going on. I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you're looking for here. This is the Make It Last Milani spray. I'm going to go ahead and spray some of this on my brush. Then I'm going to pick up some of the highlighter in this palette. So now he's got about 600 potential murders just tossed into his lap. And to any investigator, that would be a ton of murders. Someone else was investigating nowadays having that many murders potential murders and missing people in their lap. Investigators would be going crazy. That's a lot of people to go missing. And just all of a sudden, after her husband dies, they're like, hey, this is kind of an important thing, kind of a big deal. Once he gets back to the castle, and like I said, he was talking to people, and they weren't talking. It was kind of like a hush-hush kind of thing, because they had, these were probably really trusted employees, servants of the Countess. So they probably liked her. There wasn't anything negative said about her, which is crazy, because you would think like, okay, well, maybe because of this, that, and the other thing, they would speak negatively of her. There wasn't really anything that I could find where they spoke negatively about her. So as the rumors grew, of course, we were up to surpassing 600 victims, or potential 600 victims, because I say that, and if I say that there's victims, I don't know, they really didn't say about finding the bodies or anything like that. It just didn't seem, it seems a little sketchy to have that many victims and bodies aren't found. I don't know. Kind of feel like it's a bit wishy-washy, like circumstantial type evidence. Do you know what I'm saying? Like we've seen cases and it's circumstantial. That's kind of how it feels like on this. They said that it was her and some of her servants that were doing this. Well, I guess that explains why the servants weren't talking, because, if they were in on it, then, they're not talking because they're also saving their butts. Because they don't want to be accused of anything. That was their plan. That did not go as planned. Gonna add a little bit of it all over my face. Okay, a lot of it. And just gonna let it dry down. And I'm grabbing the ColourPop Fresh Out in the shade Peach Fuzz. I pop it right into my waterline. Gently. So as the rumors continued to circle, like I said, things started getting more and more heated and out of control with what they were saying. And this goes back, like I hear about this kind of stuff and I think, okay, this really does go along with the concept of, vampires, and, even the basis of fiction comes from something that is real. Just like Vlad, which I might go over him as well. But people often called him the original Dracula. That's why, you always hear them coming from Transylvania. Well, we're in the heart of they own part of Transylvania, okay? So you can kind of see where this falls into that category. Legends of the vampires and how they were created. This is the Essence Volume Stylist Curl and Hold mascara. I love all their mascaras, really, truthfully. They're fantastic. So they were saying that some of the ways that she would kill her victims would be by burning, torturing with needles, starving them, freezing them, and even drinking their blood and bathing in their blood. See, this is where it comes back to her seizures and things like that. Remember back in the very beginning of the story, her seizures, the little folk remedy was to rub blood on her mouth when she was having the seizures. So maybe she was trying to cure herself, and she thought, the more the better. And that's where maybe things got out of hand there. But with no bodies that they found. Now, I could be wrong, but in any of the research that I looked up, I could not find where they actually found bodies. And to me, that just makes it just speculation. Like, these people went out and they went and disappeared, and then they just didn't show back up. So after enough evidence, obviously Gregory was forced to arrest her and 3 of her servants. On December 30th of 1609, the Countess and 3 of her servants were arrested, which would have been like 600 plus counts of murder or torture, false imprisonment, murder, things like that. But they didn't have those types of legal terms back then. It was more like, okay, you killed this person, you tortured this person, you kidnapped this person kind of thing. And on my lips, I have lined them with the Dare to Be Bright Beauty Creations in the red. And I'm going over top of it with a nude ColourPop lippy pencil. And this one is Shot Clock. So after they were arrested in 1611, so 3 years later, the servants were put to trial. And not just put to trial, but then they were put to death. Okay, so obviously they found them guilty, but then again, you think about it, they would have been considered peasants. They were the servants. And so they really didn't have the same rights as the Countess. She had influence behind it and things like that. See, now this is where things kind of get a little like, okay, so her cousin allegedly, now this is all alleged, her cousin that was doing the investigations was allegedly having an agreement with some people of her other family, of the rest of their family, to get her land after all this happened and divide it amongst them. Because remember, like I kept saying, her family was loaded, but when she got married, she got way more loaded. So this is where that kind of conspiracy theory goes into play, where did this actually happen, or did they make it up and kind of make this like a witch hunt to get anybody and everybody who might say something? And even in some areas of my research said that people who helped out were kind of compensated, help in convicting the Countess. But she was not ever tried. She was never put on trial. This is the Milani Liquid Lip Amore Matte Lip Cream, and this is in the shade, let me find it, in the shade Madly in Love. So the Countess, like I said, she was never put to trial. But what did happen to her was that she was actually put on like their type of house arrest. Some of her family members moved in to that other fancy castle, being all greedy, and she was confined to her quarters. Some say it was like a small box, like type room, really small room. And like even the door was boarded up except for like food, not boarded up, but like bricked up, and even just like to where food could go through. But then other cases or other research says that it was her quarters. So they were large. Think about it, in castle days, they always had like a sitting area and their bed, if you think and you look back on things like that. So I would think more it's the latter of the two, the second one that I said about her having like her entire quarters. And so she was put on house arrest while other people just moved up into her house, like the rest of her family. Greedy. It's not sitting right with me, I'm going to tell you, like, it feels like to me like it was kind of like a setup. Now it could easily have been true, because with all the facts that I was looking through, but again with the no bodies, I mean, she could have really been good at disposing of them, and they didn't have the same type of concepts or abilities now to look things up. But I would have thought, like, back then they would have just kind of like buried them or whatever, or burned them. I guess that would make it so you couldn't find them. But it was very convenient that when her husband passed away, then now people are talking about her being a murderer and all of this stuff. And then she becomes, town folks start talking. Then her cousin comes to investigate. And then after she is put on house arrest because of these murders, over 600. Now, this would make her the most prolific serial killer, I think, ever. But then again, there's no super duper proof of this. So you're kind of like, there was no fair trial, none of that. They didn't think about that back then. I mean, people were beheading women just because they didn't really want to be married to them anymore. You know what I mean? So it's just, I don't know, it's really fishy. So, like I said, in 1611, her servants were tried, convicted, and then killed, executed because of their crimes. But Elizabeth was never tried, ever. She was just put on house arrest, family moved in, and she lost out. They don't talk about the kids, they don't talk about none of it. On August 21st of 1614, Elizabeth passed away in her sleep at 54 years old. Considering she was engaged at 10 and had her first child at 13 and then was married at 15 and had 5 more kids, maybe 54 wasn't young, and that they felt like she had lived a full life. To me, I'm kind of questioning this case, because if other people have something to gain from her and then that person is investigating her, it just seemed like maybe things don't add up the way it should. If you have any comments about it or ideas, or how do you feel about it, go ahead and leave comments below, because I want to hear from you. My Instagram is also down below in the description. Go ahead and follow me over there. I post other random things about makeup, my favorite things to use, and little odds and ends as well, and let you know when another story is coming up. I do try to post once a week. I thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the big thumbs up button. As always, stay awesome, take care of each other, have a wonderful day. Bye. See you next time.